Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to KlimatX's channel, a carbon exploration company that can access and develop the highest quality forestry and marine carbon sequestration projects. Joining us to discuss some recent news, a little bit of his history and what he thinks, obviously, about the climate change that's currently existing in the markets here in the environments. But James, the CEO, welcome, sir.
Great to see you.
Always a pleasure to get you on. So, I mean, you're pretty much an expert in this. I mean, with a PhD in environmental science, the climate debate, I think at this point is kind of indisputable, with planetary temperatures hitting record highs, and every year seems to bring new forest fires somewhere in the world, followed by droughts in other places. I guess the real question, do you think we're kind of screwed here, or do you think there's hope getting to this net zero target that a lot of these governments have?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things. I mean, firstly, the people who are most vulnerable to these extreme climate events are some of the poorest people in the world. Not to say that it's not disruptive in North America or Europe when these things happen, but the big catastrophic impacts of things like sea level rise will affect tens to hundreds of millions of people in places like Bangladesh far more acutely and intensely than they will here. And so the sort of leading edge of the real damage from climate change is happening to the poorest people on the planet, and that's part of the kind of motivation for wanting to do something about it. In terms of the challenge of climate change, we see things like nature-based solutions as being really important because it's often forgotten that 20% of global emissions come from land degradation and deforestation. If you think about the aviation sector, which is 2 to 3% of total emissions, relative to that, thinking about what we do with nature-based solutions could be a large piece of the pie in terms of the solutions, and that's why we're very focused on it. But what happens is you get into this debate about whether clean tech's more important, or nature-based solutions, or emissions reductions, or energy efficiency. And ultimately, to get to the 60% reduction in emissions that we need to stabilize climate change, we actually have to do all of those things. And the good news is that we've shown that we can decarbonize in North America with the transition to natural gas and shale gas. There's some problems with that as well, but economics has done a lot of work there. The scale of growth of wind and solar power is incredible compared to 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, thousands of percent more installation. Solar and wind are now at grid parity, which means they cost the same as mainstream investments. There's more capital going into them than any other sector. So the real worry is about what we call the hard to abate sectors, which are in transportation and fuels, where the progress has been much slower. So we really need to rethink transportation, and mobility is one of the big challenges for climate change. I'm eternally optimistic about this. I think this is achievable. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't do this job. But I think it does require this concentrated effort. And really it comes down to, in a large extent, what the EU, the US, China and Russia choose to do. That represents close to 80% of global emissions if you add all of that up. So again, those are big jurisdictions, a lot that we could do with them. It's not like we need 220 countries to agree in order to make these things. So I try to look at the silver lining in these debates and see what progress we have made.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the insight there. And I like that you noted that it's a multitude of fronts that are required. It's not just one solution fix all. But KlimatX is in this intriguing space, obviously. And you guys recently announced the completion of the milestones required for the first disbursement of funds from the pre-purchase agreement announced on June 15th. And that was relating to your African project there. You want to give some insight on that?
Yeah, so this is a program that we set up over a year ago to develop these projects through to a stage where we could pre-sell them to large final emitters, large final buyers. We ran a competitive process to get the best pricing we could. And then we started doing some test tree planting last year. We planted about 400 hectares in Sierra Leone. And those trees have taken well, and we built out nursery capacity. And what we announced was basically, a couple of months ago, we announced the completion of the terms of the pre-purchase agreement, which means the client gives us money, capital on a pre-purchase basis. We use that to plant the trees, and we pay them back in tons. So it's a very efficient use of capital. We spent about $2 million developing the entire project. We've received $2.5 million in addition for the first 5,000 hectares, which means we plant out, receive all the revenues, and don't put another dollar into the project, at least for the foreseeable future. So it's a really efficient mechanism for us, and I wanted to prove out that corporate buyers would make these kinds of upfront commitments, and it means we're using their money to build our business, which is great. And what they get from us is they get very high quality projects with huge social and environmental benefits to them. So it's been a really strong mechanism.
Yeah, I think this is incredibly pivotal, and I'll pass that question off to the viewers. As always, we'd love to know what you think in that comment section below, and definitely consider subscribing, because when news like this continues to hit the wire, we're going to bring it to you here. But on that note, as always, we look forward to catching you in the next one.